everybody, welcome back, because I gather we've been having some problems with the live streaming. So for those of you who might have seen me earlier, I'm starting the talk again, and if you didn't see me earlier, you'll be seeing this for the first time. I'm Chris Welch. I'm a professor at the International Space University in Strasbourg in France, and I'm also the president-elect of the British Interplanetary Society in London. I've called this talk From Imagination to Reality, which is the name or the motto of the British Interplanetary Society, because I think it not only encapsulates the BIS, but also the ISU, and also many other aspects of what those of us who work in the space sector are doing, in terms of turning ideas into real activities. I guess I was put onto this by this man here. He doesn't look very happy. It's true, this is Ludwig Wittgenstein, the philosopher. And he said, what cannot be imagined cannot even be talked about. I spent a while thinking about this, particularly in a space context, because I'm a space person. I usually find some way of thinking about things related to space. And we have to realize that we in the space sector, we are in our own particular little bubble. We have our own space ideas and images, and we know the sort of things that happen in space. But we also have our own background, our own personal experience and particular culture, and everybody does. And so when we are trying to persuade other people to support our ideas, particularly people outside the space sector, maybe investors, maybe politicians, we have to be able to find a way to kind of close the imagination gap. We may be able to imagine something, but if their imagination is down here, we won't even be able to have a discussion about it. They won't even be able to conceive it. So I think it's very important for everybody to have good communication skills, to understand the importance of narrative and imagination when we're doing, particularly communication activities, going out. In my case, what affected me, my own imagination trajectory, if you like, started in the top left here. This is the Apollo 11 landing on the moon. That was a big effect on me. I think that was really why I'm here today. But this was then fed into other things. The middle picture at the top, this is a British comic called The Eagle that was around at that time. And this character floating here in the pictures by a guy called Frank Hampson is Dan Dare, pilot of the future, who had a whole series of interplanetary and occasionally interstellar adventures, which kind of got me interested in science fiction. Round about that time, a little bit later, the original, first generation of Star Trek came out. There were other television programs. For those of you, who will know, Doctor Who was another one. But the thing about Star Trek was this was definitely about space, and it had spaceships traveling through it. Arthur C. Clarke's film, or Stanley Kubrick's film of Arthur C. Clarke's book, 2001: A Space Odyssey, was important. It was a long film. Some people think it's too long. My kids do for a start. But it was so well realized, that the technology seemed real. It really helped close that imagination gap. And then more science fiction, Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. I mean, this is, space opera, as they call it, type science fiction. And for those of you who have subscriptions to Apple TV, I put Asimov in and Foundation because the Foundation trilogy is going to be coming to Apple TV later this year. And I've seen some early pictures of it, and it looks certainly visually at least as if it's going to be amazing. And then another critical book for me was this one by Gerard K. O'Neill, the professor of physics at Princeton University, called The High Frontier: Human Colonies in Space. And this was how about, conceptually we could go to space, we could use space resources to build solar power satellites to provide power for Earth, and then also to build space colonies. And so this concept of the high frontier was very important. And Jeff Bezos, if you look at Jeff Bezos's ideas, most of them are straight out of the high frontier playbook, if you like. But there were organizations as well of like-minded people, and one of them, probably not so well known, is CCAS, the Southeast Kent Astronomical Society. I grew up just outside Dover in Southeast Kent. I could see France from my bedroom window, so very close to the continent. And this was the kind of natural place for somebody who was 14 years old and interested in space to go. And I had my own telescope. Later on, I discovered through my local library the British Interplanetary Society, and this is how I got my space information at that time. And I ultimately joined the BIS when I was 18 or 19, and I've been a member for, 40-something years now. And more on the BIS obviously later. And then this last one, the L5 Society, this doesn't exist anymore. The idea that O'Neill proposed was that these human colonies in space would be placed at the Earth-Moon Lagrangian points, in particular at Lagrangian point 5, hence L5. So for a few years, the L5 Society prospered for people who were looking at this. Eventually, it became part of the US National Space Society. So, this is kind of what launched me off on my career, I suppose. And in particular, the British Interplanetary Society, which you can see here in London. It's in Vauxhall. It's close by Vauxhall railway station. If you're catching a train, up to Waterloo and travelling in or out to the west, if you look out the window at Vauxhall, you may just see the British Interplanetary Society, out the window. Oh, there I seem to have a blank. Oh, I see. Right, I've somehow put that in. I didn't realise I'd set those up to fade. So, but the BIS is a very old organisation. It was founded in 1933. It'll soon be celebrating its 90th anniversary. And what its members believed when they set it up was obviously utter madness. It was possible to get into space using rocket motors and chemical fuels, that it was possible to travel to the moon and other planets, that in the future humans will live in space. I mean, these people's imagination was obviously getting the better of them. And you can see this quote from Professor F.R. Moulton, of the University of Chicago. Actually, the book was from the University of Chicago Press. I'm not so sure where Moulton was from, but it says, "It must be stated that there is not the slightest possibility, of such a journey." And so they were seen, completely as cranks. So they had the imagination, but you can see there was this enormous imagination gap. It couldn't even conceive that it was possible. There was not the slightest possibility of such a journey. That didn't hold them back, though. The BIS was founded in Liverpool by, it should say, businessman Philip Cleater in October 1933. By 1936, it had moved to London, and many future important figures such as Ralph Smith, Arthur Clarke, John Wyndham, Ted Carnell, and H.E. Ross joined. Now, you probably only recognise the name of Arthur Clarke there, but the rest were also famous. John Wyndham and Ted Carnell were also science fiction writers, as Arthur Clarke was, but obviously not as famous. And Ralph Smith and H.E. Ross made many contributions to the society early on. But this building here is actually in Liverpool. This is 81 Dale Street in Liverpool, and top right there you can see Philip Cleater, who founded it, and bottom right you can see the first or an early edition of the Journal of the British Interplanetary Society, which continues to this day. So it started in London in 1933, but it moved, as I say, started in Liverpool in 1933, but it moved to London in 1936. And here on the left, you can see the inaugural London meeting. That young guy there is Arthur C. Clarke, later also to become, president of the British Interplanetary Society, and also to have an involvement with ISU, which I will mention later. In the early years, they met in pubs. The Mason's Arms in Maddox Street and the Duke of York in Dering Street were two of the regular BIS hangouts. Eventually, they got enough money to be able to get an office in this building here at 88 Gray's Inn Road. And that was a headquarters for many years. Then they moved to Bessborough Gardens, and then eventually later on to where we now are in Vauxhall. And the BIS carried out many projects. Unlike many of the other space societies in other countries in the world who were at that time building rockets, unfortunately in the UK, the Explosives Act, which was a piece of anti-terrorist legislation, some things don't change too much, I think it was the 1888 or something like that Explosive Act. It was to stop people having explosives and making bombs. Back then they were concerned about Bolshevik terrorists. So the BIS had to look in other directions. It couldn't build rockets like they were doing in other countries, in France and Germany and the US. So this is where the BIS tradition of technical projects started. And one of the first was this BIS Moonship. It was designed between 1937 and 1939. And it anticipated, in fact, many aspects of the Apollo missions, the rendezvous aspects in orbit in particular. And here you can see some diagrams from that study. And then here you can see models to scale. So this is the actual lander that went to the moon, the Apollo lander, and this is the BIS version. So you can see similarities. On the other hand, the coloured spacesuit idea, which would be good for identifications purposes, didn't work out because you did need to have kind of predominantly white spacesuits on the surface of the moon for thermal control reasons. But other technical projects, MegaRock, okay, this is after World War II, when details of the German V2 rocket became known. Two members, Ralph Smith and H.E. Ross, conceived a kind of V2 derived idea to launch a human to an altitude of 305 kilometers. So if you know your kind of V2 designs, you may recognize the bottom part here. This is a typical V2 graphite vanes here. But it's a sort of stretched V2, and then may or may not be easy to see, but just in there there's a happy or not looking astronaut. So they submitted this to the British government in 1947, but regrettably it was rejected. A few years later, they came up with what they called the manned orbital rocket. Nowadays, we would of course call this the crewed orbital rocket or the human orbital rocket. But they were already looking at multi-stage orbital rockets with a winged glider on the top, which you can see, which again is very similar to future concepts that came out in the US, such as the Dinosaur rocket launch glider, or even to a certain extent the space shuttle. Of course, famously, Arthur C. Clarke in 1945 had submitted an article to Wireless World suggesting that space stations could be used as relays. Not a great deal of attention was paid to it at the time, but now he's known as the father of satellite communication, and a great deal of success has been made providing international satellite telecoms, and a number of companies make a great deal of money from geostationary communications, although that's obviously in the process maybe of being replaced by low and medium Earth orbit constellations. Another idea that Arthur Clarke and others was the idea of launching electromagnetically payloads from the moon, because there's no air on the moon, there's no air resistance. So if you had an electromagnetic accelerator, you could accelerate your payloads to moon orbital velocity or moon escape velocity just by running them down this track. And this actually was a key part of the element that Gerard O'Neill and the High Frontier groups came in on. So their plan was to dig up lunar material, load it into a sort of cup-like construct which is accelerated along this track, and then the cup would stop and the material would keep going, and then that would be captured in space and melted by an orbiting mirror, and then processed onwards to make things in space. The International Astronautical Federation, you may or may not have heard of this organization. This time last week, I was in St. Petersburg at the Global Space Exploration Conference. And hopefully in October, I will be at the International Astronautical Congress. These are two space conferences organized by the International Astronautical Federation, which nowadays has I think around 400 members of space agencies, organizations, companies, and so on. And the BIS is one of the founder members of the IAF. Initially, the IAF was effectively an association of space associations. So 18 national space associations, such as the BIS and the American Rocketry Society and others, came together to form the IAF. And since then, over the last 70 years, it's transformed. And obviously now you have big space companies and big space agencies. The societies are still there, but they don't play such a big role. And it's sad to say that of the 18 original founding organizations from 1950, the BIS is the only one that still exists, which makes the British Interplanetary Society now the oldest, continuously existing space advocacy organisation in the world. As I say, in a couple of years we'll be celebrating our 90th anniversary. Work continued at this IAF Congress in 1951. Three BIS members presented a paper on minimum satellite vehicles to put 5-kilogram payloads into orbit, and here you can see some of the illustrations. And again, some of the ideas that they came up with were later used on other missions, and we're starting to see recovery of the first stage, albeit not using parachutes as part of contemporary rocket launching. They also came up with something called MOUSE, the Minimum Orbital Unmanned Satellite of Earth. Slightly, complicated idea, but again, they were trying to come up with an idea that would enable satellites to be launched soon, and this came up with something they called Project Orbiter, which could maybe, if it had been accepted, have beaten the Russians into space. But as we know, that's not what happened. The 1950s and then were years of a lot of activity for the BIS, as you can see. You can see this is Spaceflight, their popular magazine, which continues to this day. This book, Into Space, by P.E. Cleater, the founder. This book here, The Exploration of Space, by Arthur Clarke. These are all, BIS members and founders all producing books, and these are actually all part of my personal collection, because I collect kind of old space books. Okay, some people still thought the BIS were crazy, but in 1957, Sputnik got launched, and then in 1961, Yuri Gagarin was launched into space. So people really couldn't say that the BIS were crazy anymore. And from that point of view, imagination had become reality. That imagination gap had closed. Obviously, when they finally landed on the moon, the Americans, it was accepted that sort of, maybe the members of the BIS were visionaries rather than cranks. Taking that in mind, the BIS was still looking outwards. And one of the projects I remember from when I was in my teenage years and an undergraduate was Project Daedalus, that's shown here. The top right is a cover of the original Project Daedalus report, and this was an interstellar mission. It's a robot starship designed to conduct a flyby of Barnard's star, which is about 6 light years away. The intention was for this to be just about doable within 2 human generations, so that somebody who started on the project might see it to its conclusion, which is why the flight time was 45 years. It did involve having to go to Jupiter to start off with and mine the atmosphere of Jupiter to extract helium-3 for the fusion spacecraft, but it still is, even 40-something years on, one of the most detailed investigations of what it would take to create a starship. And the BIS has continued to develop expertise. This not very good picture, I'm afraid, shows the famous red cover Interstellar studies. So different coloured covers focused on different things, and the red cover was the Interstellar one. And the BIS still has this role of looking out there at this speculative future activity, areas that maybe other people are not ready for yet. At the same time, real-world expertise. This was before the fall of the Berlin Wall, before Glasnost and the collapse of the Soviet Union, and so there's a group which continues to a certain extent today, although without maybe quite the same level of necessity, who became analysts specialists, and experts in the Soviet space program, and who could, interpret it, what was going on there for everyone else in the world. Rex Hall, who's the editor of this and a former president of the BIS, was one of those, and other studies as well. Following on from Project Daedalus is Project Icarus. This is the another review of the catapult idea. This is base building, colonization, and terraforming of Mars. This is Charlie Cockell, who's based up in Edinburgh. He's a professor up there. Project Boreas, a station for the Martian Geographic North Pole. Colin Pillinger from the Open University, his biography, My Life on Mars, or autobiography, the Beagle 2 Diaries, is published by the BIS as well. And we continue to produce magazines. We continue to produce the Journal of the British Interplanetary Society, Spaceflight, and Odyssey as well. So if you're interested, we have a website. Everybody has a website. Here you can see our website with testimonials by Helen Sharman, the first Briton in space, and Tim Peake, the second in space. And I should flag that we have just established a BIS next generation network, which you can see here, photographed, before COVID became a problem. But if you're interested in getting involved in the BIS and next generation activities, go to the website and check it out and find out how to join. So that's all I'm going to say about the British Interplanetary Society, except to say it was through my involvement in the British Interplanetary Society that I really got the confidence and the expertise to get involved in space. There's a lot more space around now, and information is easier to find. Back then, I have to say, we're talking about 1978 to 80. If you told people you wanted to work in space, they did just think you were crazy, and said, well, the UK doesn't do that, which wasn't true then, and it's not true now. But by connecting with the BIS, I connected with this tradition of yes, it is possible to do stuff, and if you have the imagination, you can change the world. And that's the thing which brings me on to talking about the International Space University, which is where I work now, here in Strasbourg in France, because a similar spirit inspires the International Space University. Here we see on the right three young people. I'm not quite sure how old they were, but I'm guessing in their 20s. Round about this time. Todd Hawley, Bob Richards, and Peter Diamandis. Todd is unfortunately no longer with us. Bob is the chief executive of Moon Express, and Peter Diamandis has so many hats on. It's difficult to know how to describe Peter. He's a serial entrepreneur with a very strong interest in space, and has come up with multiple projects throughout his life. So they were all at MIT together at that time, and they were also enthused by Jerry O'Neill's idea of what could be done in space, and they were looking to think, how could the space agenda be moved forward? And they came up with a whole bunch of ideas, and one of these was an international space university. And they took this idea to various senior and influential figures who supported it. And so in 1988, with the support of the major space agencies, the very first ISU SSP, and then it was called the Summer Session Program, now it's called the Space Studies Program, took place at MIT. And ISU has this vision. There's this credo. If you go and look at our website, we believe in a peaceful, prosperous and boundless future through the study, exploration and development of space for the benefit of all humanity. Now, I mentioned Arthur C. Clarke earlier and his involvement with ISU. Well, Arthur C. Clarke was sufficiently involved with ISU to become the very first ISU Chancellor. And he held that role for a number of years. When he stepped down as he was getting older, the Chancellor then became Jean-Jacques Dordain, who at that point was the Director General of the European Space Agency. When Mr. Dordain stood down, Buzz Aldrin, who I think probably doesn't need an introduction, was our Chancellor. And at the moment, Pascal Ehrenfreund is our Chancellor. When she became Chancellor, she was the head of the German Space Agency, DLR. She's now President of the International Astronautical Federation. And on September the 1st, she becomes President of the International Space University. So she'll be my new boss, starting in just a couple of months. So what is ISU? I mean, when I was looking on LinkedIn, I saw 900 people almost were supposedly attending. I've no idea how many people are actually watching or may end up seeing this video, but I did see quite a lot of ISU alumni on there, which was good. Those people, you already know what ISU is, but maybe you didn't know what the BIS was. For those people who know the BIS, well, now you're going to find out about ISU. ISU lives, if you like, by this credo of being interdisciplinary, international, and intercultural, what we call the 3 I's. So we study all the space disciplines, and you can see them listed here: engineering, space sciences, human performance in space, space applications, space management and business, policy, economics and law, and the humanities as well. So we are not an engineering school, we're not a business school, we're not a law school, we are the space school. We cover all of these equally. So we are resolutely interdisciplinary, and that's one of the things that sets us apart and makes us different, and also the fact that we are international and intercultural. So we are very different. If you do an ISU program, you can be having a lecture on orbit mechanics 1 hour, and a lecture on the ethics of space resource exploitation the next, and then a lecture on, I don't know, space project management, followed by one on space art. It's that diverse, everything to do with space. So what is ISU kind of collectively? It's this diverse body of students and then alumni, and then obviously all the associated teachers with an interdisciplinary understanding of space, understanding the big picture, understanding how all the different bits link together. And this photo, I think, shows the diversity quite well. I would love to say that this is in Strasbourg, but Strasbourg is a long way from the sea. This is actually Haifa in Israel, when we had our summer program there 4 or 5 years ago. Lovely view out over the Mediterranean. And what ISU tries to do is develop future space experts and leaders at graduate level, to give them a competitive edge to begin careers in space-related fields. 80% of the alumni work in the space sector. We also have a role in making people, helping people make career shifts within the space sector, or even people who have gone a certain way down their professional life, and then decided they want to move into the space sector. So it's possible to be looking at space and then go, how do I get into that? And ISU can provide a pathway there. At this point, having operated this many years, that's a mistake, I should say 1988 to 2020, we've got about 5,000 or more alumni from over 110 countries around the world. I mean, looking at this map, you can straight away see that there is an issue with Africa, which is something we're working on particularly at the moment. We do actually get really pleased every time we can colour in a little bit more of this map, and we have an ISU alumni, we hope eventually from every country. The issue here is one of funding. Okay, ISU is a private but not for profit institution. We are supported by big space agencies and big companies to provide scholarships. But so far, there are not so many scholarships that will support people from Africa. We do have African alumni. I'll mention some of them later on. But so if there's anyone out there who has some good ideas about how to generate money to support, in particular, people from Africa to do ISU programs, please get in touch. Other thing people don't always realize about ISU is we are actually quite a small institution. Okay, this is the total number of faculty at the central campus. So there's, my current boss, the current president, who will be stepping down soon, and then this group here. And you see we're all in different areas. We have 2 scientists, we have a management and business expert, we have somebody in applications, human performance in space, engineering and applications. So we cannot deliver all those programs, ourselves. So there are many other what we call global faculty around the world, people who have contributed to ISU programs for so many years that they if you like, they've collected enough loyalty points that they get faculty status, but they don't actually work for ISU. They're just supporters of the project, and also, of course, a wide range of guest lecturers. This is a chart of all the different things we've done since the start, 1987 to 2020. I don't think I will read through that. I don't really know why I put that slide in there. It's not quite so exciting. Here's some representations of some of the projects we've done. This is something called SHEE. You can see it there, sort of SHEE, the Self-Deployable Habitat for Extreme Environments, which is a European-funded project for a deployable surface testbed. These are a couple of my former students, not at ISU, I should say. This is at ZARM in Germany, because this was a sonoluminescence project in microgravity. So this is the experiment which is later going to be dropped down the ZARM drop tower there. This one I like because you may be aware I'm head of the Space Payloads Lab. Well, this shows that I guess this was about 18 months ago when all 3 of our payloads, these 2 black cubes and this reddy brown one here, were on the International Space Station. So these were 3 payloads we sent up with the IceCubes service. One of them is a methanogenesis, or was a methanogenesis experiment. This one here was a plant growth experiment. These have both come back, but one of them is still there, and that is actually an interactive art payload, because we're ISU and we're interdisciplinary. So we like to do things like that. A little bit about our programs. As I said, I'm the head of the master's program at ISU, but there are these other programs as well. I'm just going to mention them kind of very briefly. So the master's program is a 1 or possibly 2 years program if you want to do the extended thesis project as well as the main individual project. That always happens, in Strasbourg. Here you can see one of our classes after the traditional kind of Christmas astronaut panel. You may not recognize them, but these 3 guys here, Claude Nicollier, Bob Thirsk, and Jean-Jacques Favier are astronauts, and they came by to meet with the students. We have the Space Studies program, which is our summer school, which is actually starting this Monday. Or usually it moves around the world each year, and it was meant to be fully in Granada this summer, but actually because of restrictions on how many people we can put in rooms, it's actually being run split site, part in Granada and part in Strasbourg, and also a section of it online as well. So that lasts 9 weeks. That's a very intense 9 weeks, a mixture of lectures, specialized disciplinary department exercises, and team projects. Maybe say a bit more about team projects in a minute. We have a Southern Hemisphere SSP. This is a 5-week program, and it's the only one that undergraduates can actually do. If you're in your final year, you can actually do this program. It runs in January and February at the University of South Australia in Adelaide, which is also the new headquarters of the Australian Space Agency. ISU's been involved with that down the years, as well. If you want to go to Australia in January and February, that's their summer period when they have the break, you can do this one here. In fact, immediately before giving this talk, I was just finishing some online classes for the Commercial Space Studies Graduate Certificate, which is a 6-week program that we do jointly with Florida Institute of Technology. The first year it happened, which was 2019, I actually got to go to Florida. And you can sort of see me standing at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Park on a visit there. Last year and this year, it's all been had to being delivered remotely, but I'm hoping that sort of next year we'll be able to go back and teach that one in Florida. The focus on this is on commercial space and technical and entrepreneurial management, so that's why it's the commercial space, and it's a graduate certificate. We have a 4.5-day interdisciplinary introduction to space for people from a wide range of professional backgrounds. We run that I seem to have multiple mouse pointers here. We run that obviously in Strasbourg, but we also have started running it in Seattle. Just before COVID, I went down to Australia to run it for the Australian Space Agency at their request, because they're a new space agency. We ran an online Asia Pacific one. We do specialized ones for some companies. So for example, for EUMETSAT, the European Meteorological Satellite Organization, we've done some dedicated courses for them. And we're going to run our first one in Israel, in Tel Aviv, we hope, in October. So that's that. And we also have the Space Resources Professional course, which is a 2-day course which we run together with the Colorado School of Mines and the Luxembourg Space Agency. This usually runs in the context of the Luxembourg Space Resources Week, just before or just after. We've run it twice so far. The first time it was in person, and you can see you can see everybody here. This isn't everybody on the course, mind you. There are about 50 people on that course. This is just the ISU alumni who are on the course. So all these people had done a previous ISU program and had come back to do this space resources course. So that's the end of the courses, but I do want to say a little bit about one of the special things that ISU does, which is team projects. Every program, with the exception of the executive space course, because it's only 4.5 days, we have a team project, or sometimes called a white paper. It's a core component, and the plan here is that we give the teams, which are typically around about 20 or so students from different countries and different professional backgrounds and with different expertise, and we give them this complicated problem. We choose it to be relevant to the current global situation. There are 2 broad sorts of projects. The ones we say are looking back at the Earth, so they're for the benefit of the people on Earth, or they're looking out. They're to do with exploration and moving away from the Earth. And basically we set the problem for the students, and then they have to work out how to organize themselves and how to solve the problem and write a report. Whether this is within 9 weeks on the SSP, or whether this was within sort of 9 months, for example, on the masters. And so here are some some examples of different projects we've said. If you're interested in any of these projects, if you find the ISU website, find your way to the library. These all exist as PDFs on our library, and all of them are downloadable. So we look at all sorts of different ideas: water management, disaster management, Arctic, space debris, solar weather, micro-based satellite internet access, Africa, the global south, manufacturing for exploration, sustainable development on the moon, space for urban planning, enhancing space competitiveness. So these are all the things that we're trying to do, trying to get people involved in, trying to get people to think about, so that these 5,000 at the moment alumni can learn together, act together, build humanity's future in space. That's the purpose. And again, it's to do with imagination. It's about bringing people together and giving them a shared imagination of what might be possible, in the future if we work together. In terms of where do ISU alumni or ISU students come from, well, the biggest number is the US, the second one is Canada, China, France, and you'll be pleased to know that the UK, if you're from the UK, nominally I'm talking to a UK audience, but I realise it's international, is the 4th one. I will say that this is a little historical. There was a lot of US participation early on. That's dropped off a bit. Chinese participation is going up very significantly, and I think if they keep up their current engagement with ISU, they're going to come into second place and then maybe even eventually into first place. So what do ISU alumni do afterwards? Well, obviously we're going to start off with the astronaut. There was actually a couple of ISU alumni astronauts, but the most recent one, the one that everyone will hopefully remember, is Jessica Meir, who did the Masters. And in fact, actually thinking about it, all these people I'm showing you here are ISU Masters students. Elodie Viau, who's now an ESA director, is one. Violetta Kuvova works at SES. Chiara Menflati used to be head of the Portuguese Space Agency, but actually she's moved back to ESA. Rei Kawashima in Japan, Secretary General of UNISEC. Michael Davis did the Masters in the first year it existed and got very interested in space, and then basically went back to Australia and has been indefatigable in making things happen to do with space. And I think that's one of the reasons he's from Adelaide, that in the end the Australian Space Agency has its headquarters in Adelaide, and where we have this relationship with the University of South Australia. And in my first year as the Master's Program Director, which was 10 years ago, these three guys were my students, and they set up a company which is now Spire Global, and 10 years on, it's valued at somewhere between 500 million to 100 million to $1 billion. So go them. I do wish sometimes that professors could get just a small percentage of the income that their graduates get in the future, but that's not part of the way they pay us yet. But that would be good. And then other space companies you may have heard of, Planet, Robbie Shingler, one of the co-founders there. I said we had some African alumni, and here you can see in particular two Nigerians, Abimbola Alale, who's the chief executive of NIGCOMSAT, which is the Nigerian communication satellite, and Professor Timebi Aganama, who's a professor in the US. Nicola Peter, head of DLR International Relations. That's not actually true anymore, because in a couple of weeks he's going to be joining the ISU faculty. I'm not going to read all of these out, but I just want to give you a kind of snapshot of where people go to after doing ISU, at various stages, later on in their career, all the different areas. Here we have, architects, doctors, engineers, lawyers, all over the world. Just to mention that, Adrianus is now currently at the Johnson Space Center because he's the flight surgeon for Thomas Pesquet. So he's been posting pictures on Facebook about the fun he's having there, pictures of people on board. So very, very wide range of people in all sorts of different areas. More of them than I remember, actually, but lots and lots of people. Oh, in this slide, alumni from South Africa. Apologies for this. I'd forgotten this. I did a similar presentation for some folks in South Africa, and I wanted to emphasise the South African alumni. But while we're doing it here, Nigeria and South Africa are the two big countries that we have African alumni, and you can see Val Mansami, for example, is the CEO of the space agency. C.S. Mostert, who's created many space companies in South Africa as well. Peter Martinez, ex of the University of Cape Town, now executive director of the Secure World Foundation in Colorado. So that's, I think that's enough from me. I've been talking for just under 45 minutes, and if there are questions, I'd like to have the opportunity to answer them. If you want to catch up with ISU, you can find us online at these places. If anyone wants to connect with me, on social media, I'm pretty open. You can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter and so on. So just search for Prof. Chris Welch and you'll find me. So that's me done. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. We have one question from the audience. It's about BIS and its goals for future.
Sorry, what was the question?
By BIS goals in the near future.
A BIS course?
Goals.
Goals. Oh, well, that's a good question, because in August I become the new president for 3 years, and so what I've been thinking about that already, but I haven't come up finally with my goals. But I know that I want to increase the BIS engagement with the general public. I want to increase the diversity of the membership, and I want to build on our very strong tradition of technical projects, and to make those more widely known, because we do some interesting technical projects, but I think they could do with more publicity. I mean, it's very nice to talk about the Daedalus project. It was a great project, but it was back in the 1970s, and I think we need something a bit more contemporary.
So how much is the ISU influenced by foreign governments such as the US now?
When you say influence, do you mean do they try and tell us what to do, or do they impact on our operations?
About both.
Well, we have stakeholders, mainly space agencies, in terms of representatives of national government. So, for instance, on the ISU Board of Trustees, there is a NASA member who contributes the NASA point of view, and that feeds in along with all the viewpoints of all the other national space agencies. So we have an ESA rep, we have a CNES rep, we have a DLR rep, we have an ASI rep, we have a JAXA rep. So all the space agencies will all be putting their views into our Board of Trustees. But of course, that ultimately comes down to the whole board deciding. Then how does it impact our operations? Well, from time to time, the US will make international decisions which will impact us. I mean, one of the reasons that sort of people like to do the masters is because of the internship possibilities. If they want to do an internship in the US, for example, they have to get a US visa to get into the US. And if the US changes its decisions on visas, then that will impact us. That's at an operational level. In terms of telling us how to operate, no, that doesn't really happen at all, because one of the values of ISU, I think, is that it's seen as neutral territory. Sometimes people say to me, so you're in France, you're in Strasbourg. Why are you in Strasbourg? Why are you not in Toulouse? Toulouse is Space City, France. Why are you not there? And the answer is because if we were in Toulouse, we would be seen as the French Space University, and there are plenty of space universities, very good space universities in Toulouse already. So we are in Strasbourg in a city that represents international cooperation, so that we can be neutral, so that we can be a place where people can come together. So we try and as best we can, keep our sort of ourselves internationally neutral and not be heavily influenced by lots of different people.
Another question was whether ISU works with other universities, for example, to get professors for specific subjects.
Oh yes, a lot of our visiting lecturers, some of them come from space agencies, some from space companies, but yes, we have many academics coming from different universities. Particularly, since we're in France, obviously, European ones. There's a number in France. There's a number in Germany, Italy, but also in other countries as well. And although the COVID lockdown has been a disadvantage in many ways, it has made it a bit easier to get international lecturers. I mean, nobody is seriously going to fly from California to Strasbourg, to like give 2 hours of classes and then fly back. But the effect of even what we're doing now means it's much easier to get an expert from Australia, who we've never been able to get before, to give a lecture on the program. So Alice Gorman, for example, from Flinders University, she's the preeminent space archaeologist in the world, as far as I'm concerned, we've never been able to get her to lecture on the program before because she's in Australia. I mean, ISU, as I said, ISU is the central campus is small. I mean, ISU employs 26 people, I think. That's, some people think we're like one of the NASA research centers, and it's going to be this enormous gleaming place with rockets. No, so we are very much a network-centric institution. We can't exist without all our links to all these other organizations and institutions around the world. Can't hear you at the moment, Luca.
Sorry. What is your applications process to joining the ISU?
To do an ISU program for all, I will exclude the short courses because they're kind of professional development. If we're talking kind of student courses, you have to have an undergraduate degree. Okay, that's the prime one, except for the Southern Hemisphere Space Program, where we will accept final year undergraduate students. If you go to the ISU website, you'll find an online admissions process. All the details are laid out there, but it's an online admissions process. But the minimum requirement is an undergraduate degree. And because we're interdisciplinary, it doesn't have to be a degree in science. It doesn't have to be a degree in engineering. The very first year I was the program director, I had a student on the course who had a degree in tourism, at the same time as I had all these hardcore, engineers as well, because that's the different thing about ISU. You get all these different backgrounds. We've had architects, we've had graphics designers. This year on the masters, we have an artist. When I say an artist, I mean that's somebody with a significant reputation in international contemporary art. Joining the program. Very, very broad range of backgrounds.
So you mentioned that ISU was quite small like university and community. Do you have any plans to expand?
Well, interesting question to ask just at the moment, because obviously we have a new president starting in a couple of months, and I know that she has plans. What I'm not sure is whether I'm allowed to talk about them or not. So, because she's not actually president yet. I had a meeting with her out in St. Petersburg last week. So we have plans, but I think that's probably all I had better say at the moment, and until she's actually in office and I'm clear about which bits I'm allowed to talk about.
Do you organise regular events to keep your alumni in contact with the university and each other?
Yes, I would say to a point. Personally, I think we could do more, and the current president, Juan de Dalmo, has been keen to promote that. I mean, in a couple of weeks here in Strasbourg, we'll be having an alumni conference. So that's focused around having the SSP here. So we will have as many alumni who can get here as possible. And over the last couple of years, we've started running from time to time space cafe events in different parts of the world. So we've had them in Washington and San Francisco and Tokyo. I know. But honestly, I think there's more that we could be doing without a doubt. Just over the last 18 months, of course, the focus has all been, with doing stuff online. So we did our first, big online event and our first big online alumni conference, which went extremely well, I have to say. But this summer we're back, we hope, fingers crossed, to doing things in person, which will be nice.
Someone in the audience was wondering what kind of facilities you have at the ISU.
Well, as I say, we're not terribly big. So I mean, we have a certain amount of laboratory space. We have a human performance in space laboratory. We have a physical sciences laboratory. But again, being an interdisciplinary institution, I mean, before I was at ISU, okay, I was at an engineering school in the UK. And certainly we don't have at ISU, we don't have nearly the range of facilities for technical education that we had that I was used to there, where we had, I don't know, something like 20-25 technicians, and an enormous mechanical workshop full of all sorts of very good tools and other stuff like that. ISU doesn't have that because we're not that sort of university. So we have an extremely good library. We have probably the best space library in Europe in terms of a dedicated stock of space-related library books. We get people come and visit us when we do need to use mechanical workshops and so on. We have fortunately good relationships with other institutions in Strasbourg. Strasbourg is, I believe, after Paris, the city in France with the second highest number of students. And I forget how many different there's the University of Strasbourg itself, and then multiple schools, and we have a couple of good relationships with local, when I say schools, I mean university levels institutions. So there's ECAM, which is a specific engineering school. INSA is the Telecom Physique School, which is just across the road from us. So that's how we tend to do things via networking.
So one last question. So thank you very much for joining us today. We are unfortunately running out of time. So what advice would you give to a young person who would be interested in starting a career in the space sector?
Oh, well, clearly join the British Interplanetary Society. That's my first piece of advice. Sign up for our Next Generation Network, because that's exactly what it was created to do. To solve those problems. We've got some very good, energetic, and obviously they're younger than me. But then as I get older, more and more people become younger than me. Join the BIS, join the Next Generation Network, join UK SEDS. That's another organisation. I'm a former chair of UK SEDS very, very many years ago. If you're in the UK, I mean, if you're not in the UK, but I would say that definitely join UK SEDS. Or your local branch. A bit later on, look for the Space Generation Advisory Council. That's another extremely good organisation, a global organisation for people under the age of 35, and get yourself into the information flow. There are a lot of opportunities for students and young people, but you have to know about them in order to activate them. So, for instance, for the IAC, each year the IAF runs what they call its Emerging Space Leaders Grant Program, and will fund, depending on where it is, somewhere between 20 and 40 students and young people to go to the IAC, which is an amazing experience because there's many dedicated activities for students and young people at the IAC. So so first of all, join some groups and some organizations so you're in that information flow and you know what's going on. If you're watching this tonight, then you've obviously taken the first step along that path. So, time to follow up on that. But yes, probably most importantly, join the BIS.
Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. I hope it's been entertaining. I'm glad we got the technical problem sorted out. And as I say, if anyone feels like connecting over social media or sending me an email, I think I put my email at the start of the presentation. That's absolutely fine. Just don't expect too quick an answer because I say we're just about to start our summer school on Monday, which means that the next couple of weeks are going to be a little bit busy. So thank you all.